Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about asserting oneself, being able to say to another how we think and feel, and if needed to also change the way they're responding so it fits better with ourselves. Now this can be a challenging thing for anyone to do, particularly if you fear that it's going to go badly or the person may react not well. Then we might have a natural tendency to avoid that, and if over time we do that, what we run the risk of is losing our sense of self over time. So people that struggle to assert themselves will often come into my clinic and say, I don't know who I am, I don't actually have a sense of who I am. What's happened is that they've spent a long period either people pleasing or being unable to say what they think and they feel. So it's really important to our self-esteem and also to our direction in life that we're able to say to people no. Or no, not yet, or I'd really like you to do things differently. This is a skill, so it's something that we have to learn to do. Now, if you come from a family where perhaps your individuality or emotions aren't talked about a lot, then I think you're going to very naturally struggle in this area. But it is a skill, and it's actually quite straightforward to learn. So what I want to share with you today is a 5-point communication structure that looks at how we might do that in a way that allows other people to hear what we need to say without them becoming defensive. So let's think a little bit about not asserting ourselves and what happens if we don't do that. So I've mentioned about your self-esteem, I've mentioned about having a sense of being lost. It might also be that the only time we do communicate when things are difficult for us is when things have got really bad. And so at those points we kind of go to the person, we say, this is not okay, all our emotions are out there, and it doesn't go well. So that's probably not the best model. And also it probably gives us the impression that talking about how we feel is not the thing to do and it doesn't go well. That isn't the case. What we need to do is be doing it regularly and learning it as a skill. So let's talk about that 5-point communication structure. What does it look like? Well, the first point 1, and actually what I'd like you to do while I'm going through this is perhaps you yourself think a little bit about a situation. Either you've got to say no to somebody, or you need to say something that feels very difficult, something that you're kind of avoiding doing and you really want to be able to do it well. So imagine that situation in your mind and try and think with me, get a piece of paper, try and write out with me as we go along through these 5 points. So the first point in this structure, this communication structure, is what we call the identification stage. So this is where we identify with the other person and we start to story them in a nice way. We start to think, oh, maybe they didn't mean it or they haven't known about it, but we frame them in a positive way. Now this can be difficult if we're feeling really annoyed with someone, but it's really worth trying to do a little bit of this section first, because what that does is it makes the other person feel that, oh, this person's not looking at me as a bad person, that they do see my situation, and it stops that kind of situation where as you start to say how you feel, the other person says, well, no, I didn't mean that, and they start to interject. So we just need to sort of nail it from the start and just say, listen, we know this is unintentional, and there's things going on, so we're helping the other person understand we don't see them in a negative way. So take a little bit of time, even if you have to make it up, just make it up, because it will help oiling the wheels of communication for the next bit that we need to put in. So that's point 1. Point 2 is however I feel. Now, ... So we need to think a little bit about how has this person or the situation left us feeling. Now this isn't what we're going to do about this. This is feeling emotions, and I want you to get down not to anger, but the emotion before anger possibly, and that might be hurt, humiliated, guilty, worried, or ashamed, or any of those really soft, vulnerable emotions, and try and name them for the person. This situation has left me feeling this. Now the good thing about naming feelings is that they can't be challenged. So someone can't say to you, well, you don't feel anxious about that, or you don't feel guilty about that. There's nothing to be said for them. They're able to hear what's happening for us, and that's what we need to try and get across. Point 3 is the explanation for why we feel that. So we go into a little bit, not a long discussion, but just probably about a sentence about why we're feeling that. That helps the person understand the context. And then point 4 is a very important point, often one missed off, because people are often saying, oh, I feel because this, and I feel because that, and I feel because that. They rarely go on to point 4, and point 4 is the instructional stage. So that's the stage where we ourselves have got to think, what would we rather? So this is the point 4, is what we say when we say to people, what I would rather happen or what I'd rather stop happening. So we start to give them a little bit of a helping hand to understand what's going to be better for us. Now that can be, you might need to do quite a bit of thinking about that. What's a better outcome for you? But it is important that you deliver that solution to the person so that they can understand what's going to be helpful for you. And the final stage is the feedback stage, point 5. This is because we deliver point 4 and we say, this is what we'd rather happen. It's not a command, we can't command somebody. So what we do in point 5 is we just finish off by saying something like, would that be okay? Can you see where I'm coming from? Does that make some sense? What do you think? So we're starting to try and form a dialogue with the person. We're trying to say, this is where I'm at. This is what I'd like to change. What do you think? So it's respectful. Now, it might be that the person says, well, no, I can't do that, but I can do this. And you can decide whether or not that's okay or not. Or they might just say, well, no, I'm not going to do that for various other reasons. What's left for you then is that you could go straight back up to the top in what we call the broken record technique, which is where we just start right back up the top again and we say, look, I know you didn't mean this, however I feel, because what I'd rather. So we just go straight the way through it again. So this helps to close the communication down and enables the person to hear. And it also stops the conversation drifting on to something else. So this is, as you can see, this is quite formulaic. It's not rolling off the tongue stuff. So you do have to sit down and really think about how you're going to do point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. It's not going to be something you necessarily feel comfortable at first with, but what I always say to my clients that I see is to say, don't feel fearful about bringing a piece of paper along to the person, saying, listen, I've been thinking about this situation that happened last week, I've got something important to say to you, but I've written it down just because I'm not great at this, so just bear with me, and then you take your time and you go through each of the sections. It's more important you deliver that communication effectively than it is to look like you're all on top of it and you can deliver something really smoothly. The other person won't mind a piece of paper being there. They'll just think, this person's really thought about it, I better listen. So that's what I'd urge you to do. A couple of extra points with this particular structure, just some words to be careful to avoid. Things like using the word you, you, always and never. These are things that you really ought to be careful bringing into that structure. So when we use the word you, for example, what we're doing is we're positioning someone opposing us. So instead of saying, when you do that, I'd rather you say, when this happens this way, or when that occurs. We don't use the word you. We don't want to raise people's defences. And of course the words always and never are absolute. So of course someone's going to object every time you use that word. So try and avoid doing that. So I'd like you to just let me know what you think about this structure, whether you've used it effectively. It's great in the written form. It's great talking to people, but it's just, I hope, gives you the confidence to just know that if you deliver communication with these 5 points, that you know that you haven't attacked somebody, you haven't insulted them, you've been clear, and by all accounts, it's going to be a way of avoiding activating other people's defences, which is probably often what's perhaps gone wrong or what we fear might go wrong in communication. So best of luck for that. Please post up how things have occurred if you've tried it. I'd be really interested in hearing. Bye now.